Here is another quote. A certain city member should be taken out in the backyard and shot in the head like a pig. That quote is from our current human resource manager.
Thanks for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed, and we are back again, and this time I am doing something I haven't done before, which is a three-part series. This is the third part right here, Fiasco and Pasco, the Sunnyside connection. And the reason why I'm doing this is really because of a sequence of things that have happened. I wasn't really planning on doing a third video on this story, and as part of this series, I was kind of planning on doing one in the future. As you've probably seen, and if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and watch the first part, Fiasco and Pasco Part 1, and then the Cronemeyer Chronicles, which was Part 2, and then, of course, we're back to Part 3 here. And you can appreciate this video even if you haven't seen the other two, but the other two are linked down below if you want to watch them first. Crazy things have been happening in Sunnyside as kind of a continuation of this story as we've been dealing with bad bureaucrats and crazy decisions and things that the community have to get engaged to fix in their local communities. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you, if you haven't hit the like and subscribe button, please do so down below. If you want to know more about We the Governed, you can go to my website down there. You can see all the other politicians that I've busted over the years for breaking various ethics and campaign finance laws, among other things. There's a lot of information there. But also, I want to encourage you to share this video with others if you haven't done so already. The more people who see these videos, I think, the more that we can inspire people to be engaged and involved in their local government to make a difference. Now, for those of you who might be geographically challenged, perhaps, when it comes to Washington State, and you're wondering, where is the city of Sunnyside? Well, it is in Yakima County. You can kind of see it right here. Both Yakima County and the small city of Sunnyside. It's about 16,000 people live there. It's been around for quite a while. It's in eastern Washington, and it's a very heavy agricultural area of the state. Apples and picking cherries and all kinds of other agricultural products, if you're familiar with Washington State. It's a beautiful part of the state, and it is oftentimes sunny, just like the name implies. However, this is not really the topic. The topic is going to be more about the fact that there's been a lot of little scandals that have been coming out of the city, and it relates to my Fiasco in Pasco series because their recent HR manager here basically accused a city council member of being a racist and getting a restraining order against her for doing things that he didn't like. Now, of course, like anything else, there was more to the story, but the City of Sunnyside had some problems, and one of their city council members had left, and of course, this council person right here had Teresa Hancock. She was actually appointed to replace by the city council to replace a city council person who had resigned. And so that's really where the story came from, because the Sunnyside HR manager, Mr. Brown here, accused her of harassment and racism, of course, as he sought a protection order. Now, I knew I recognized who this guy's name was. This came out since the last video that I did on this subject. If you go back just a couple years, he had been on the city council of Pasco as well, and he had basically claimed that there was a bunch of racist attacks on his campaign, and there had been problems with hate speech or something attacking his signs. And of course, that led to me digging into this a couple years ago, and I actually did this video here about racism in Pasco and how it's so bad that they have to fake it. It had to do with what appeared to be some kind of collusion with either the Democrat Party in Franklin County or this union or somebody else creating this fake racist letter and sending it to the city of Pasco and attacking Mr. Brown there, who was on the council at the time. And they knew it was a fake, and so they didn't do anything about it. But of course, that upset the people who created the fake racist hate letter. And so they made a big deal out of it after supposedly his signs were vandalized later on. It was obviously fake. It was just a race hoax kind of situation. And fortunately, the bad people that were claiming this did not prevail in those elections at the time. But then I'm wondering, how the heck did this guy end up in the city of Sunnyside, which is one county over, but it's still nearby, and he didn't exactly identify himself as a highly capable person at Pasco either. Well, it turns out that in my part 2 of the Fiasco and Pasco, which had to do with former county manager Mike Cronemeyer here, also known as Mike Gonzalez / Cronemeyer, depending on what era in his life you managed to figure out what he's doing. He's changed his name before. He was the one that hired Mr. Brown to come over and be the HR manager after Mr. Gonzalez Cronemeyer became the city manager in Sunnyside. So there was all kinds of drama, and basically earlier this week there was a special meeting that the city council had, and I'm just showing you a quick clip here, but this is kind of what it looks like if you go to their YouTube channel, and I'll link to it down below because this is a kind of a classic just a public meeting event where people are testifying. There's issues on the agenda. It's a work session, but it's a special meeting, and they're going to be going into executive session, and there's all kinds of drama going on in this meeting. And the end result of that meeting was that they did put Mr. Cronemeyer here, Mr. Gonzalez Cronemeyer, they put him on 30-day administrative leave while they investigate him based on some of the issues that have been uncovered. I kind of lightly touched on that when I did the video last week, mostly about Mr. Cronemeyer, Gonzalez guy here. But of course, when I go back and I looked at this and I talked to some people who were at that meeting and I watched the whole video, as I would encourage you to do as well, there's a lot of drama going on. It's really worth getting into it. So normally I don't do videos like this, but I probably should moving forward because this is really just one of those classic examples of a public hearing where you have the opportunity to come in and testify. Again, limited to about 3 minutes. You can testify before the city council, and you can bring up issues that you want to talk about. And the city council is managing the meeting itself. Now, you might hear, I can't remember if it's on this clip or not, but the mayor there is basically running the public comment period. And so various people are coming up to the mic, and you could tell that Mr. Cronemeyer Gonzalez, he had actually clearly motivated a bunch of people to get in there and speak up on his behalf. And I'm going to talk about that later on in this video, but I want to go through these little clips because each one kind of sheds its own special light of exactly what was going on. And there was some entertainment and some fireworks in this meeting. So let's play this clip and you can hear an example of the testimony right now.
I would like to start with a quote. Our mission, to achieve equity, political rights, and social inclusion by advancing policies and practices that expand human and civil rights, eliminate discrimination, and accelerate the well-being, education, and economic security of Black people and all persons of color. That is a statement of the organization from the NAACP, an organization that has very much achieved everything in their mission statement and continues to reach for so much more. Now, in comparison, here is another quote. A certain city member should be taken out in the backyard and shot in the head like a pig. That quote is from our current human resource manager, who is the local chapter, or was the local chapter of said NAACP. He stated those words are being taken out of context, misunderstood, and other excuses. I don't know if any of you knew that before you stood up for this. However, there is not excuse. Not one single instance where taking a woman out back and shoot her in the head justifies or solves a problem. Not one. Now, when you then include the context that this came about because the city council member was requesting a public record, a request for information that we all have a right to. So does he think anyone who makes a record request deserves to be shot? Is he truly that careless and that ridiculous with his words? Perhaps he chose that specific term because that is how the city manager refers to this council member. He calls her a disgusting pig. I know this because he has said that to me about this council member on more than one occasion.
Now, I wanted to play that not so much because of the crazy quote about that Mr. Brown has made and admitted that he made, actually, about taking this council member out and shooting her in the head like a pig. But because this was testimony about it, and remember before her, and I'm going to encourage you to link, you can see the whole thing in the context below. Clearly, the HR manager and the city manager had organized and kind of gaslit some people to come out there and give testimony about something, especially the younger college-age kids. I don't think they really knew anything about it. They just thought, oh, there's racists in Sunnyside, and so we'll go and speak up against all the racism that's exuding from this city. But instead, the reality is is that this guy had made this quote, and it was controversial. And why did he make that quote? Well, that was the topic that I kind of addressed in my video last week on this subject, which is just that she had been clearly making a bunch of records requests, and the city manager was trying to stonewall her and basically running through this circus of shutting down the city hall and making all this drama, doing even a press conference about it or a press release saying we're going to shut down the city hall just so that we can handle records requests, very simple records requests, just for financial records that were coming from this one city council member. And so obviously some people that were more familiar with what was going on were willing to come in and testify. So let's go to the next person who testified right after her, because, and I'm not going to do this too much, but there were just a couple of these things that really put it into context. And I thought that their testimony that was given by these people was actually effective at explaining perhaps some of these issues. So let's listen to this clip right now.
The Sunnyside deputy clerk was welcomed and praised prior to coming into her new job, a position that needed filling, and work experience with the public that she had was a great plus. She was in the attendance of the department head meeting. She heard what Mr. Brown said, quote, "Take her to the backyard and shoot her in the head like a pig." It troubled her, and she took the matter to our city manager. She expressed her concerns as any good employee would do that has the integrity and high standards and good morals. She was standing up for a fellow citizen of this city. She did not know Councilman Hancock well.
Please
they were not
mention
friends.
Names. Please.
Okay. Yet she took the chance to report this with no thought that she would lose her job over it. This employee was let go a short time later.
Now, the significance of this testimony, which I had to go back and dig into this a little bit more, so I just got a little bit better background and understood what this was about. This had to do with a kind of lower level clerk that was there and who had been in that same meeting where that same quote was made by the HR manager, Mr. Brown there. And she was concerned because usually, and just in case you don't know this, as a general rule, most of the time, even in Washington state, the bureaucrats don't typically talk about dragging out politicians and shooting them in the head like pigs. So because that's an unusual experience that she had in that meeting at the time, she rightfully thought, yeah, that's kind of a violent thing. I mean, we might actually consider that violent and a little bit concerning. And so she went and complained to Mike Gonzalez, Cronemeyer guy, who had been hired as a manager, but she probably didn't realize that he had brought in Mr. Brown. And obviously the city manager didn't want her to report this, so he fired her. Now, that's not the appropriate approach, just in case it's not clear, when an employee is finding something that is obviously concerning and raising attention to it. That's really not a good enough reason to go and fire somebody. Again, even in Washington state, even if they are a conservative and you're a leftist, that really isn't the basis of justifying a firing. But it also helps explain the context of the previous testimony that had been played there. Now, the interesting thing about this is, remember, this testimony was in between several people that got up and looked like they had like prepared statements that were handed to them. I don't know if it was by the Democrat Party or by the NAACP or who gave them their quotes, but there were some people that probably just didn't know anything about what they were talking about, and somebody gave them comments. That's fine. It's a public comment period, and you have your 3 minutes. You can say what you want. Now, if you're wondering why she was interrupted, this person right here, she was interrupted by the city manager because there is a rule that most jurisdictions, it's kind of nebulous, but they would prefer that that you don't bring up people by name when you're directing statements at them. I kind of disagree with that rule anyway, but that's what you heard the interaction with the mayor and this person testifying. And the mayor isn't particularly trying to shut her down. He's just trying to uniformly enforce that rule, particularly because it looks like when you see this video that this room was packed. There was a ton of people there in the audience. And although you can't hear them, you can tell by the mayor's interaction that he was trying to restore order periodically or deal with people clapping or, the usual boisterous sort of thing that you would expect at a public meeting. Now, the next testimony, this is unusual, and this is one that I don't typically see. You can listen to it, and then I'll explain the background, at least from my perspective on this one. Here it is.
And the number of people that have come forward to me and shared their tears, their anger, their fear, no city employee should ever work under fear. The finger pointing, the wagging in the face, the profanity at City Hall, The ugliness that they deal with, it's unheard of. I work with city clerks all across the state of Washington. Sunnyside is the only place that I have experienced this. My husband would be here tonight and he'd be translating for me, although I'm pretty darn good at Spanish, as are my children. That's how we raised them. We are servants. We raised servants. Listen to the truth. I've been online. I've seen everything that's out there. What is being pushed out there is not true. Many of you know me. You know me. You know how I work. You know my ethics. Do your homework. Follow the law. The public records alone is astonishing.
Okay.
How many seconds do I have left? None?
Yeah, the timer just went off.
Well, nobody gave me a 30-second. So I get 30 more seconds?
Council, any objection?
No objection.
No objection from council.
Okay, I would just like to say as regards to public records, 25 years experience. I have never worked for a city, nor have I supported or worked with any other city clerk in the state of Washington or public records officer or certified records officer that has ever said no to a city council member's request for information or records. The fact that we are not providing information to council members at Sunnyside is in complete opposition to what the public records is about. You didn't need to close City Hall. Records can be provided in installments. Records can be provided in a timely manner. You were made to believe something different. Do your homework. Understand the Public Records Act. If you don't know, call me, email me. I'd gladly mentor you, share information with you, connect you with other city clerks.
Thank you.
Now, the context of this particular testimony is different than most public testimony that you usually get in a city council or county commission or school board kind of setting. And what was interesting about this person here, who I don't know, but, and I kind of cut off the first part of her testimony because she's given her background, mostly because it took too long, I think, to do that. And it's a constant critique that I do have of people who go do public comment. If you spend most of your time explaining your resume, you won't get to your public comment, especially when you only have 3 minutes. She did that a little bit here, but it was interesting because the context of her statement was very different. This is an unusual person testifying at a public comment period because she clearly had worked for the city before. She'd been a clerk before. She sat on a number of these commissions and was a professional advisor to many clerks all around the state of Washington. And so her professional background and then professional knowledge of the city, because that's where she used to live and work, and her family still lived there. And because she had grown up there, a lot of these people who were on the city council, they already knew her, and they had that experience with her. And she got involved or engaged in this apparently probably for the same reason that it really piqued my interest beyond following the city manager, Gonzalez Cronemeyer guy from Franklin County, where I saw him do some strange things. But watching this whole thing about shutting down the city hall, which was just a kabuki theater fake story that he apparently made up to pretend like he didn't, as to justify why he didn't really want to give the city council member a perfectly legitimate public records request, which is just simply the mostly financial stuff. If you can't provide the financial information to the city council for whom you theoretically are working for, who've been elected by the people or at least appointed in her case recently, but you can't give them any of the information that's related to the finances. So this person who has a lot of years, decades more than I do, experience with the Public Records Act, clearly she saw the same thing that I saw and how weird and strange that was. And also she brought up in her testimony the manipulation of the media, where the city manager appears to have, and with his HR manager, clearly providing fake stories out there and gaslighting the public and the media to make stories that just flat out clearly weren't true. And they were so amateurish that they just drew a lot of attention. And so by her own testimony, she drove over from the West Side, which is where she lives now, to come in and testify, because I think of the firing of this previous clerk and the stories about these public records. But it was an unusual type of testimony because the background of the person testifying here is clearly very professional and knowledgeable on the subject. And so there's a little bit of credibility that she's built up probably over the decades of working in this area and with the people who sit on the city council, at least some of them. So that was kind of interesting. Now, to be fair, let's talk about what the response was. And you'll see on this next clip, here's a response, part of it, because what happened is the city manager he actually signed up for public testimony as well. And the city council, wisely, because he's going to have plenty of time to talk during this work session anyway, they decided, why don't you put your comments in at the end? And I think that it was important that they let him speak and give his side of the story, or at least part of it. And that was an interesting thing to observe. And again, I'm going to encourage you to watch it and watch the whole thing. But there were two things that really stood out very strongly to me here. And I want to play this clip right now. You can see the first one right here.
We've entered into a purchase and sale agreement for the Munson property that will hopefully bring desperately needed housing to our community. And we are finally rebranding Sunnyside, so we're not smelly side, not with slogans, but with real substance that's making a difference.
Now, the significance of that little comment, and basically what he was doing, and it's not an unreasonable thing to do if you're in his position, because now I think he's being outed by a variety of people, the former employees, people who used to work there, people who are seeing that there's some shenanigans going on with what's happening behind the scenes in the city. So he has to defend himself. And so what he's going to do is he's going to come out and say, listen, I've done all these amazing and incredible things here. Now, I'm going to point out, when you go back and read stories about when he was first hired here at the City of Sunnyside, he said he was going to be the most transparent and super open about what he was doing. And yet the very thing that was drawing my attention, and clearly the attention of the former clerk and other people, to this situation in Sunnyside, was the fact that he wasn't transparent. He was actually substantially concealing financial records from the very city council that he supposedly works for, let alone the public. Something's really wrong. There's really weird. By the way, that was a pattern of behavior. We had the similar problems going on when he worked in Franklin County, from what I can see. And so now suddenly you're seeing the same pattern of behavior identify itself. And then what I find with bureaucrats like this, and not to pick on Gonzalez, Cronemeyer guy here, but a lot of times these bureaucrats really think that they're the center of the universe and responsible for everything good that goes on around it. And so there's an arrogance that tends to come along with that. And so then claiming that this was smelly side before he got there, and now suddenly it's sunny side, that is shockingly insulting, to be honest with you, for the people who live there and who've been working probably in the community trying to do things, and a weird claim for him to make, that suddenly, because of his mere presence as a bureaucrat in the city, that he changed it from smelly side to sunny side. That was a weird comment. But that wasn't the only one that he made that was kind of interesting, the only comment that he made in his response. The next comment here, I think you should listen, because I think it's kind of related to the very videos that I'm producing right this minute. Let's hear what he has to say here.
I cannot change the past, whether it's Sunnyside or my own. My life has been an open book for 3 years, battling nasty politics of Franklin County, people on the far right trying to destroy me, but they won't destroy me because I just keep moving forward.
Well, I think he's right about this. His past and recent experience has been that he just keeps jumping ship from one place after another after doing the damage that's caused by when he's employed there, from the city of Pasco to Franklin County and now to the city of Sunnyside, but suddenly pretending that there's a far-right conspiracy to take him down. I mean, frankly, there's 278 cities roughly in Washington state, 39 counties, there's 40 some odd port districts, there's 295 school districts. There's plenty of local government managers that don't stand out like a sore thumb like this guy did. If he hadn't gone in and been so amateurish and weird in how he dealt with public records and so hostile to the other employees who were clearly identifying things that need to be exposed, and then bringing in the strangest and odd people that he could to kind of be his little crew in this city, he wouldn't be on my radar. I mean, I wouldn't be doing a story about him at all. And of course, then suddenly trying to pretend like it's some kind of partisan far-right attack when it's simply your own behavior that's drawing the attention of the elected officials and the public and anybody else who cares about open and transparent government. And so pretending to be a martyr and, all those kind of things, that really is going to genuinely not terribly play well to either the audience that's there or anybody else that actually knows what's going on. But what I do find is there's a certain level of narcissism that does tend to come with the territory here. And so this belief that they're going to be a martyr when they've been really the victimizer, as far as I can tell, in most of the activities going on in the city and in the county before then and in the city before that, there's clearly something wrong in the pattern of behavior, is the person who keeps creating that pattern. It's not every new bunch of people out to get you. It's genuinely the person who keeps jumping ship and then creating problems and drama wherever they go. But that's not the last clip. This is going to be right here, the very last clip. So keep in mind, the context of this is that the city council in Sunnyside voted to put him on suspended administrative leave for 30 days while they investigate a variety of problems and accusations that have come forward that are probably significant and even beyond the scope of what I'm describing here in this video. And one of the things they directed him to do is to leave his computer and his car and the phone and not take it home with him. Yeah, leave it with the city of Sunnyside. And you can kind of see here he is getting up. They voted 5-2, so only 2 of these council members voted to keep him, and the other 5 decided to kick him out, and that they didn't want him there. And then you see him right here packing up his computer and taking it with him. Now, that's where the video cuts off. Where the story continues, at least according to the people that I talked to who were there, is he started to leave with all this stuff, and right after literally just minutes after he'd been directed to leave his computer and his phone. And keep in mind, this is part of the public records request stuff that's going on, because now people want to know what the heck is he hiding. So he tried to take that with him, and they had to send a police officer out there to actually take that stuff back, because it was property of the city, it wasn't his. And that included the keys to the city car. And this was a weird thing. Now, that I have to tell you, that is not something I see every day. And so that was a kind of a final drama ending to this event. And keep in mind, there's plenty of people there in the public who were his supporters as well. They saw this whole thing go down just like you and I can when we go and we watch the video. So there's a number of things that I feel like are worth, taking away from this. Now, the first thing you'll notice here is that there were some stories that came out just indicating, basically this was today. I'm recording this on Tuesday, so this had just come out. This city council meeting was on Monday. So here's the articles that just came out saying, hey, that was the vote. And from his perspective, Mike Gonzalez Cronemeyer, he comes out and he says, hey, everything here is just a big witch hunt, as it always is, as it was in Franklin County, as it was in Pasco, as it was probably everywhere that he's worked. It's always been a witch hunt and everybody's out to get him. And so that was the story that he had. And so that's the two dueling narratives that are going to be going on right now while there's investigation going on. And so that's kind of, an interesting element to this whole story. Now, there's a couple of takeaways, I think, that I think are really worth discussing here and just explain a little bit more detail. So number one, the only reason I think that this guy was getting exposed here is he just wasn't either smart enough or experienced enough to know how to properly gaslight more people than he did. But he still was able, because I think of his media background, to do a reasonably decent job encouraging or motivating some people to come there who don't know any better, and they testify on his behalf. That's not uncommon. You see this frequently in most jurisdictions. But with a more sophisticated person, you'd get some more believable public testimony of people who actually know you and people who maybe are a little bit more familiar with what's going on, and maybe they're just a little bit better at delivering the message. Pulling college students out of the woodwork and then throwing them up there to public counsel is probably not the optimal path, or having pre-written statements that somebody's never really read before and they are trying to read it on your behalf isn't terribly impactful either. But it's worth noting, because this is one of the techniques I see that is used. Secondly, and this is another thing here, is just manipulating the media. In this case, I would say that the city manager, Michael Cronemeyer, Gonzalez guy, his background in the media really gave him a leg up. And you can see this consistent pattern wherever he goes, where the media just basically he's spoon-feeding a bunch of stuff to him, and they're just regurgitating whatever he tells them, which is why you have a one-sided narrative on these stories. You saw in the Tri-City Herald in Franklin County. You're seeing it right now in the local news out in Yakima, and it's only because there were people who were on the inside knowledgeable enough that they were pushing back on some of this, because they said, listen, clearly the one-sided story that's being spoon-fed to the media isn't even close to accurate. And that's why I think you saw that former city clerk getting out there, traveling across the Cascades just to get over here to make this kind of a testimony and explain, listen, something's really wrong here, and the media's got it wrong. The third thing is, and this is more from the public testimony of the former city manager himself, which is this whole thing where you'll see him saying that he's the center of the universe, right? He's got heroic accomplishments and achievements that are amazing and incredible, taking credit for things he probably had very little to do with. And this is common. Credit grabbing exists all over. Listen, if you work in a big business and a big company, you know it happens all the time, just like it does in government. But it's frequently done in government. It's almost it's a pro sport in government, where government will claim credit for things that they have absolutely nothing to do with, and it happens all the time. And you see this with very narcissistic bureaucrats, and it's very difficult to also distinguish when you read that testimony here about maybe saying everybody's a racist or saying that it's all witch hunts or something like that. The problem is there are people that do come in and try to clean up what's going on when you have a corrupt or a bad place, and they do have to sometimes fire and get rid of people. And so it's very difficult sometimes to make that distinction between somebody who's genuinely going in there and doing the right thing versus somebody who's going in there and realizing that in order to cover up what they're going to do, they have to get rid of any good or honest employees so they can't report the truth about what's actually going on behind closed doors at government. That distinction between the two, if you're pretty good at putting down a facade or pretending, you can gaslight enough people, or you can spread the city's money around widely enough to your friends, maybe you can get away with it. I think most of the time, if they're pretty sophisticated and smart, they get away with that. Now, finally, this is where you always will see there's something wrong. When a senior bureaucrat or an agency or an entity within government is getting squirrely around financial records or contracts or the history of those financial records and contracts, that is not a good sign. That is never a good sign. And the one consistent thing that we do see with this particular person is that wherever they've worked, there's been financial challenges that have existed in the wake of their career path. And learning, I guess maybe you learn a little bit after you've done this a few times, that trying to find a way to conceal those records from the elected officials, let alone the public, is a particularly bad and warning sign in most cases. This is true even in Washington State. I know that a lot of bureaucrats conceal and hide the fact that money's gone missing or been spent poorly where they worked. But that doesn't give them the right to go in and conceal that truth from the public. They get to do that from the state auditor every time they show up and do their fake audits. So they do that already, but to hide it from the public like this when there's actually people watching, that's usually a pretty big red flag as well. This goes beyond even the weird comments about calling people, saying that you're going to go take them out back and shoot them in the head. That's actually a relatively new thing. I don't see that actually in most places. That is kind of unique right now to this story. Now, when I'm talking about activism and being involved and engaged in local government, I'm really talking about something just like what we saw here in Sunnyside. But it looks like a windy, difficult, tortuous path to get to the truth. And I totally understand that. It really does. For most people, when you're looking at this, you can look. It's like a 2-hour video, so I'm sure most people aren't going to go and look through the whole thing. But and there's a bunch of stuff in the middle that's just basic order of business that you'll see in a regular city council meeting. Some of the things they talked about there were things like dealing with animal services. They basically need an animal control officer maybe to deal with too many dogs or problems that were maybe burning up police resources, getting different legal counsel, how to deal with Public Records Act issues, other things that are basically kind of predictable, day-to-day, mundane, fairly boring from maybe the public's perspective, just basic issues you deal with if you're in a city council. But when you have bad people getting into government, whether it's a bureaucrat or an elected official who make bad choices and bad decisions, it can feel like you're driving on this windy road right here trying to confront this, trying to figure out what the heck's going on, trying to navigate almost like a maze through the lies or the deception or the goofiness or the drama it always seems like it's, I think for most people, not worth the effort. But I think it is. And one of the reasons why I think it is that if you don't address it If you don't confront it, if you don't show up and make an impact, you're not going to have a lot left when they're all done looting the city or the county or leaving whatever burdening the next generation with a bunch of problems that were created and very avoidable, but were created by bad choices or bad decisions of previous elected officials or bureaucrats. They do a very good job trashing cities and trashing city councils. They do it in the county level. They do it at the state level. They do it at the national level. And that's why you want not perfect people, but just above, you want people who aren't just completely and thoroughly and absolutely corrupt. You want people that aren't just in it for themselves, preferably people that actually have some level of capacity to do the right thing and to make decisions that are both intelligent and at least somewhat capable. Otherwise, this is what we end up with when all we have are crooks and clowns in government. Now, when I talk about activism again, and this is going to be what I'm going to be closing with here, just to explain, there's no perfect path no perfect solution to fixing what's broken in government. And there isn't. It also is a lot of work, and it's more of that long grind down that long, windy road trying to address and fix the problems that you're saddled with from previous elected officials and bureaucrats and bad decisions that were made in the past. This is common. Everybody has to deal with this at some point in time or another. It's just the way it is. So when you start down that path, there's no guaranteed afternoon, guaranteed 2-hour afternoon Sunday specials where there's some kind of solution to all the world's problems and it's simple and easy and you're done with it in a weekend. That isn't how it works. It often just takes a lot of good choices, cleaning up the mess, sometimes an imperfect and unclear path that you have to travel down to fix these issues. But it can be fixed. It can be addressed. Most situations can be turned around, and you can make the city or the school board or the county government or whatever you're involved in locally, you can make it better than it was before. You do have to remove bad people from office sometimes, like that city council did just recently in Sunnyside. But they wouldn't do that if there weren't people who were there showing up and exposing the truth and willing to ask questions and willing to get those public records and willing to look a little bit closer past the gaslighting, past the lies, past the fake news stories. Without them, the city of Sunnyside would be continuing to go down a really bad path. But I think they've had this opportunity now. It starts, I think now, they've started to fix things, maybe. And if they continue to go down that path, they can make things quite a bit brighter. And that road becomes a little bit clearer that you travel down. But that's only because those other people were willing to show up. That's the only way you can get to the future, is to show up now and start fixing it now. Because, as I always say, the future belongs to the